Jasmine took a slow, deliberate breath, letting the weight of the courtroom's tension settle over her like a storm cloud. Every eye was on her, every camera lens trained on the poised figure standing defiantly in the center. She reached into her folder, pulling out a document carefully marked, a record of the legal, moral, and factual evidence she had prepared. The room seemed to contract, the murmurs fading into a collective hush as she raised her voice, clear and unwavering. "Your Honor," she began, her tone calm but resolute, "this ruling threatens not only the fairness of the law, but the very principles this court is meant to uphold. Let us examine the facts." She laid out each point methodically. Precedents that had been ignored, interpretations of the law misapplied, evidence that directly contradicted the assumptions underlying the fine. With each revelation, the energy in the courtroom shifted, subtle at first, then more palpable. Gasps punctuated her statements, the air crackling with disbelief and awe. Reporters scrambled, fingers flying over keyboards to catch every word, every nuance. Cameras zoomed in on faces in the audience, lawyers frozen mid-note, spectators leaning forward in disbelief, colleagues nodding quietly in admiration. Social media had already begun to light up in anticipation, snippets circulating as the courtroom drama unfolded in real time. The narrative that had seemed set in stone now trembled under the force of Jasmine's clarity and precision. Judge Thomas, for all his authority and experience, felt the shift immediately. His jaw tightened, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his normally impassive face. He opened his mouth to speak, but Jasmine anticipated the interruption, countering with a calm, almost surgical assertion that left no room for dismissal. "With all due respect, Your Honor, authority without accountability is not justice, and when a ruling ignores both precedent and principle, it must be questioned." Her words were deliberate, moral and legal weight intertwined, leaving the judge momentarily speechless, the courtroom hanging on her every syllable. The crowd could feel the tension snap like a live wire. A whisper ran through the room, then a murmur, then an audible stir of agreement, subtle but undeniable. Spectators exchanged glances, lawyers shifted in their seats, and reporters instinctively leaned closer to capture the seismic moment. Jasmine continued, revealing documents that highlighted inconsistencies in the prosecution's claims, legal oversights that undermined the credibility of the $500 million fine, and historical examples of rulings overturned in the face of similar injustices. Each point landed with precision, striking like a series of calculated blows that chipped away at the judge's perceived control. Judge Thomas faltered. His usual composure wavered as the courtroom dynamics flipped. The aura of invincibility that had surrounded him seemed to dissolve under the weight of Jasmine's reasoning. For the first time, the room sensed a palpable imbalance, power shifting from the expected authority figure to the hero standing in quiet defiance. Jasmine's presence, her preparation, and her unwavering commitment to justice created a momentum that was unstoppable, almost tangible. By the time she paused, the courtroom was electric with suspense and awe. Every observer felt the magnitude of what had just occurred. Triumph radiated from Jasmine. Not arrogance, not vindictiveness, but a quiet confidence born from knowing that preparation, principle, and perseverance had prevailed. The whispers grew louder, a chorus of acknowledgement that rippled through the room, the kind of instant validation that only moments of undeniable truth can command. And then, the moment crystallized. The judge's authority was still present, but it no longer dominated. The courtroom had shifted, subtly at first, then unmistakably. Spectators leaned forward, some nodding in respect, others murmuring disbelief. Media crews scrambled to report live, capturing every stunned reaction, every wide-eyed glance, every subtle nod of recognition. Jasmine had transformed the narrative. She had taken what seemed a predetermined defeat and, through clarity, courage, and principle, turned it into an undeniable moral and legal victory. And in that moment, the entire court began to rally behind Jasmine. The moment Jasmine stepped back, the courtroom seemed to release a collective exhale, a breath held so long it felt almost sacred. Outside the courthouse, the world erupted. Within minutes, social media exploded with hashtags like #Justice for Jasmine, #Crockett wins, and #courtroom victory, each trending faster than anyone could track. Clips of her calm, precise dismantling of the $500 million fine flooded feeds, replayed millions of times, each view a testament to the power of preparation, principle, and courage. Comment sections lit up with awe and admiration. Voices from across the country, from students to activists, sharing clips, commentary, and personal reflections. The narrative was clear. Jasmine had not just won a courtroom battle. She had captured the imagination of a nation. Legal analysts scrambled to dissect the outcome, some praising her meticulous preparation, others marveling at how decisively she exposed the flaws in the ruling. Pundits debated the implications for the judiciary, with conservative and liberal voices alike acknowledging that the courtroom's dynamics had shifted, if only temporarily, in favor of integrity over intimidation. Every blog post, op-ed, and televised segment carried the same underlying theme. This was a moment when principle had prevailed over power. Political figures weighed in as well. Allies of Jasmine hailed her victory as a reaffirmation of justice, while opponents struggled to downplay the spectacle, their talking points undermined by the undeniable precision of her arguments. Even celebrities and public influencers joined the conversation, praising her poise, intelligence, and courage, amplifying the story to audiences far beyond traditional political spheres. Tweets went viral. Instagram Reels racked up millions of views, and commentary threads spilled into multiple languages, reflecting the global resonance of her moral and legal victory. Jasmine's influence grew exponentially in the days that followed. Invitations to speak at forums, requests for interviews, and calls for commentary on other legal and social issues came flooding in. But more than fame or attention, it was the moral victory that mattered, the affirmation that integrity, courage, and careful preparation could dismantle even the most imposing authority. She became not just a lawyer winning a case, but a symbol, a figure who embodied the idea that justice is not passive, that it requires vigilance, intellect, and a commitment to doing what is right even when the stakes seem insurmountable. The ripple effect reached beyond the courtroom. Grassroots movements celebrated the victory as proof that the system could, in rare moments, work for those willing to stand unwaveringly for truth. Citizens shared their stories of overcoming intimidation, of challenging injustice in their own lives, seeing in Jasmine's triumph a mirror of their own struggles. Media outlets documented the phenomenon, framing it as a turning point in the cultural conversation around fairness, authority, and accountability. And yet, for all the virality, analysis, and accolades, there lingered a quiet truth beneath the frenzy. The lesson transcended hashtags, commentary, or political debates. It was deeper, subtler, yet far more consequential. But the ultimate lesson of this courtroom battle went far beyond fines or rulings. As the echoes of the courtroom drama faded, Jasmine Crockett's victory took on a significance far beyond legal precedent. She had not merely overturned a staggering fine. She had demonstrated that courage, principle, and integrity could confront even the most intimidating forces and prevail. Her triumph became a testament to the enduring power of dignity over arrogance, of reason over intimidation, of justice over fear. In a society often polarized by power and politics, Jasmine's example reminded the public that one voice, steadfast and prepared, can change the course of events and inspire collective belief in fairness. This moment illuminated a fundamental truth. Justice is not a passive ideal, but an active pursuit. It requires vigilance, clarity, and the willingness to face daunting obstacles without compromise. Jasmine's calm composure under pressure and her unwavering commitment to principle exemplified the very qualities that underpin a functioning democracy. Her actions reinforced the idea that laws are meant to protect the people, not to elevate authority above accountability. This victory, rooted in careful preparation and moral courage, offered a vivid lesson to anyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of systemic forces. Beyond the legal arena, her actions resonated as a reflection of broader American ideals: service, perseverance, and integrity. Jasmine's career had been a demonstration that success is earned through dedication to others, that influence is most potent when wielded responsibly, and that ethical steadfastness is a form of leadership more powerful than intimidation or coercion. Her story inspired citizens to confront injustice in their own lives, to uphold truth when compromise seemed easier, and to act with courage even when the odds were daunting. The emotional resonance of her victory rippled far beyond the courtroom. It became a source of hope for those who had witnessed similar struggles, an affirmation that moral clarity and determination could yield tangible outcomes. Communities celebrated not just a legal win, but a symbol of empowerment, the idea that individuals who act with principle can alter narratives, reshape expectations, and challenge entrenched authority. Jasmine's triumph was no longer just her own. It belonged to everyone who believed in the possibility of justice prevailing over intimidation. In the end, this was more than a legal victory. It was a reaffirmation of values that define character, society, and democracy itself. Courage, integrity, and perseverance had not only triumphed in the courtroom, but had inspired a nation to reflect on the power of standing firm in one's convictions. The moment crystallized a timeless message. Standing up for what is right can inspire change, galvanize communities, and ignite hope in the face of overwhelming challenges. And this unforgettable moment would become a symbol of standing up against injustice everywhere. Jasmine Crockett's courtroom triumph, the reversal of a $500 million fine, and the moral victory that followed, was not just a headline. It was a story of courage, preparation, and unwavering integrity that reminded us all why standing up for justice matters. From the tense opening moments to the mic-drop counterattack that flipped the courtroom, Jasmine's journey illuminated the power of principle in the face of intimidation. Her actions reaffirmed that dignity, truth, and perseverance are forces that can shift not only legal outcomes, but public consciousness itself. Now, it's your turn to engage. Reflect on this story, share it with friends and family, and discuss the broader lessons it offers about courage, fairness, and resilience. Every like, comment, and share amplifies the message that integrity and preparation can overcome even the most imposing challenges. Subscribe to the channel to follow more stories that reveal the human spirit, political intrigue, and unforgettable courtroom drama. Stay connected, stay informed, and be inspired to act with purpose in your own life. Because in the end, this story is bigger than any single case. It's a call to believe that standing up for what is right matters, that the voices of those who act with courage can ripple through society, and that moral victories are victories for everyone who values justice. Justice isn't just a word. It's a fight worth taking. The courtroom was alive with tension, a charged silence broken only by the occasional shuffle of papers and the distant click of cameras. Every eye was fixed on the center aisle, where Jasmine Crockett stood, composed yet alert, her gaze steady under the harsh glare of the overhead lights. Reporters murmured, their whispers rising and falling like a restless tide, capturing fragments of disbelief that seemed almost too immense to comprehend. Then came the announcement that sent shockwaves through the room. $500 million. The figure hung in the air, heavy, almost tangible, as if the very walls of the courthouse had absorbed the collective gasp of every onlooker. $500 million, a sum so staggering that even seasoned legal experts exchanged incredulous glances. For Jasmine, it was not just a number, it was a statement, a weapon thrown with precision, a test of endurance and moral courage. The murmurs swelled into a cacophony of outrage. Some shook their heads, unable to believe what they had just heard. Others muttered about the audacity, the sheer audacity of the fine itself. Cameras flashed relentlessly, freezing expressions of shock and disbelief that would soon circulate across news feeds and social media platforms. Through it all, Jasmine stood with unwavering poise, her presence a quiet storm in the eye of a raging legal tempest. The courtroom seemed to contract and expand around her, every heartbeat sinking with the tension that had gripped the room. And then, as the judge leaned forward, eyes narrowing with the weight of authority, a ripple passed through the crowd, a subtle, almost imperceptible shift. Something unexpected was about to unfold, something that would upend the assumptions of everyone present. But what happened next shocked everyone present in the courtroom. The courtroom was no longer just a chamber of law. It had become a battleground of perception, power, and principle. Weeks of meticulous legal maneuvering had led to this moment. Subpoenas had flown like arrows, motions were filed and countered with surgical precision, and every word exchanged in prior hearings had been dissected, analyzed, and amplified across news networks. Headlines screamed, social media erupted, and the political world watched with bated breath. Every angle of Jasmine Crockett's career, every prior victory, every principled stance had been scrutinized, parsed, and in some corners, weaponized against her. But Jasmine's record spoke for itself. Time and again, she had stood for truth, fairness, and justice, often when the odds were stacked against her. From defending marginalized communities to holding powerful interests accountable, she had earned respect not through loud declarations, but through unwavering action. Her integrity was a beacon, and it cast a stark contrast against those who sought to exploit technicalities and bend the law to personal agendas. It was this very moral backbone that now faced the ultimate test, a $500 million fine that threatened not just her finances, but her reputation, her principles, and, some feared, the public's trust in the justice system itself. The media frenzy only magnified the stakes. News anchors dissected every nuance, commentators debated every possible outcome, and online platforms churned out viral clips of courtroom exchanges, each one punctuated with shock and speculation. The political implications were equally explosive. Allies watched anxiously, opponents smirked, and a nation hungry for justice or scandal weighed in on every tweet, every opinion column, every breaking news update. Jasmine's response, composed and unwavering, would not only define the outcome in that room, but could reshape public perception of what fairness, courage, and accountability truly looked like in modern America. Amid the roar of whispers, flashes, and camera shutters, the tension became almost unbearable. Every observer knew this was a defining moment, not just for Jasmine Crockett, but for the ideals she represented. A single statement, a single strategic move could ripple far beyond the courtroom, echoing through households, headlines, and hearts across the nation. It was a moment pregnant with consequence, a crucible in which integrity and intimidation collided. And as the judge prepared his final words, no one could predict the twist about to unfold. Judge Thomas had always carried himself with an air of unshakable authority. From the moment he entered the courtroom, the weight of his gavel and the sharp cadence of his voice commanded attention. Decades on the bench had honed him into a figure both respected and feared, a man whose rulings were often described as precise, unwavering, and occasionally merciless. In the eyes of his supporters, he was the embodiment of order, a guardian of the law who ensured that the scales of justice tipped decisively in favor of control and precedent. But beneath the robe and the imposing demeanor, there was a pattern that critics had long noticed. Judge Thomas's career was punctuated by controversial decisions, rulings that often seemed to bend toward power rather than principle. Dissenting opinions painted him as stubborn, sometimes bordering on arrogant, unwilling to consider perspectives that challenged his worldview. Political commentators had dissected his judgments for years, noting a subtle but persistent bias that leaned toward authority figures and punitive outcomes over fairness and nuance. It was a brilliance in control, yes, but one that sometimes blinded him to the human element, the subtlety of moral courage that could not be quantified by statute alone. Public perception of Judge Thomas was a complex portrait. To some, he was the ultimate arbiter, a figure whose mere presence could silence arguments before they fully formed. Lawyers entering his courtroom knew the drill: respect the rhythm, anticipate his sharp questions, and tread lightly. Journalists and commentators often described his courtroom as a theater of tension, a stage where he dictated not only the law, but the narrative itself. Social media reinforced the mystique, clips of his stern glares and clipped remarks spreading widely, casting him as both a formidable force and a figure many loved to critique. The man was calculated, deliberate, and seemingly unflappable, a villain molded by the system he dominated. Yet even the most imposing figures have cracks. Those who studied him closely noticed subtle patterns in his confidence, brief moments of impatience when arguments were delivered with precision and unshakable poise. It was here that Jasmine Crockett's team saw opportunity. The same arrogance that had allowed him to dominate other cases might blind him to the strategy, preparation, and moral clarity of a woman who refused to be intimidated. Judge Thomas, seasoned though he was, underestimated the weight of integrity and public support that Jasmine carried into the courtroom. He believed his authority alone could dictate the narrative, never anticipating that the very courtroom he controlled could turn against him in the blink of an eye. Every decision, every flick of the gavel, every measured pause had built a reputation of dominance, but it was a dominance susceptible to a hero with clarity, courage, and the perfect counter. The stage was set. The media, the spectators, the nation, they all sensed that something monumental was about to unfold. And Judge Thomas, confident and commanding as ever, was unaware that the tide of this courtroom drama was poised to shift irreversibly. But Jasmine had prepared a response that would turn the entire courtroom upside down. Jasmine Crockett's path to the courtroom was forged in fire, shaped by struggle, and sustained by an unshakable belief in justice. Growing up in communities often overlooked, she learned early that integrity and courage were not abstract ideals. They were survival tools, lifelines for those without a voice. Every obstacle she faced, Every door that was slammed shut because of circumstance or bias became fuel for her relentless pursuit of fairness. It was this very resolve that propelled her through law school, late nights filled with case studies and statutes, and into a career where she would champion the marginalized against formidable odds. Her reputation had been built quietly, but resolutely. Jasmine never sought attention for its own sake. She preferred action over applause, substance over spectacle. Each legal battle she undertook was marked by meticulous preparation, careful strategy, and a measured calm that unnerved even the most aggressive opponents. Colleagues described her as unflappable, able to absorb pressure, analyze complexity, and anticipate moves before they were made. Even in moments of intense scrutiny, she maintained a poise that drew respect, earning allies in unexpected places and often turning skepticism into admiration. Jasmine's record spoke volumes. Landmark cases defending civil rights, challenging unjust fines, and standing against systemic inequities had established her as a figure who blended legal acumen with moral clarity. To the public, she was a symbol of resilience and integrity, someone who could navigate the stormy waters of politics and law without compromising her principles. It was precisely this combination of skill and character that made her formidable, not just in the eyes of Judge Thomas, but in the court of public opinion. Yet what truly set her apart was her strategic thinking under pressure. Jasmine understood that every courtroom confrontation was also a narrative, a story told to juries, reporters, and citizens alike. Her moves were never impulsive. They were deliberate, calibrated to expose arrogance, illuminate truth, and protect the principles she held dear. With every deposition and cross-examination, she laid the groundwork for moments that could turn a fight for justice into a spectacle of moral triumph. It was this preparation that had brought her to the present moment, a courtroom tense with anticipation, a judge confident in his dominance, and a public watching every expression, every gesture, every word. Jasmine knew that the battle ahead was not just about legal technicalities. It was about courage in the face of overwhelming pressure, about showing that integrity could withstand intimidation, and that one voice, unwavering and principled, could challenge even the most imposing authority. Every experience, every battle, every challenge had honed her for this exact confrontation. The audience outside the courtroom and the spectators within could sense it. Jasmine Crockett was ready, calm, prepared, unyielding. The moment she had been built for was finally here. And now, the courtroom showdown everyone was waiting for was about to explode. The gavel struck with a sharp, resonant authority, and the room fell silent once more, the weight of anticipation pressing on every chest. Judge Thomas leaned forward, eyes narrowing, his voice cutting through the stillness. "Miss Crockett, the court has imposed a fine of $500 million. Do you understand the gravity of this ruling?" The words were heavy, deliberate, designed to intimidate, and to many, they landed like a blow. Jasmine lifted her gaze, unwavering, letting the silence stretch for a moment before she spoke. Each word was measured, calm, precise, as though she had anticipated this confrontation in every detail. "Your Honor, I understand the ruling," she said, her voice steady. "But I must also address the principles at stake and the broader implications this decision carries." The room shifted subtly, the murmur of whispers rippling through spectators who sensed the first cracks in the illusion of absolute authority. Judge Thomas's jaw tightened. "Principles do not override the law, Miss Crockett. Any further argument will be noted and may have consequences." His tone carried the weight of finality, a warning sharpened with years of control. Lawyers in the gallery shifted uneasily, Journalists leaned in, and cameras captured the exchange in a flurry of flashes. It was clear he intended to assert dominance, to remind everyone that in this courtroom, he dictated the narrative. But Jasmine's composure never wavered. Her reply was deliberate, weaving calm authority with pointed clarity. "With all due respect, Your Honor, the law serves the people, not the other way around. When rulings threaten fairness, they must be questioned, not to defy the court, but to uphold justice itself." A faint murmur ran through the courtroom. Some spectators leaned forward, sensing the tension rise. The statement was subtle but loaded, a challenge that planted doubt while maintaining decorum. Verbal sparring escalated. Every exchange was a delicate dance, the judge asserting control, issuing veiled threats, Jasmine countering with logic, clarity, and an almost imperceptible moral authority. Each pause between words was heavy, pregnant with possibility, a battlefield in which every glance, every inflection carried weight. The spectators, the legal teams, even the cameras seemed to hold their breath, attuned to the rising energy in the room. It became evident that this was more than a standard hearing. It was a clash of wills, a test of authority versus integrity, power versus preparation. Every observer knew that the tides could shift at any moment, that one misstep or one perfectly timed argument could change everything. The tension was palpable, electric, crackling with anticipation. The courtroom held its breath as Jasmine prepared her ultimate move,